I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. Welcome to another episode of Women's Health Unplugged. I'm excited to have this conversation. My guest that I have on the show today, who I was just going to introduce as Michael, because he's just affectionately in my house known as Michael, and that's it. It's just first name Michael. But Mike D'Angelo, who is my trainer right now, we are going to have a conversation about exercise. And it's interesting when I have reflected back over my own personal health journey over the last 7 or 8 years, the crux or the foundation of the entire infrastructure that is my health is based on my love of, dedication to, and obsession with exercise. And that has not come easily for me. I am a very athletic person, but that was never emphasized in a way that gave me the kind of like structure and routine that I needed to pursue like actual fitness goals. So just a little bit about my backstory first before I introduce Mike and get him to share his absolute wisdom with us. I did grow up as a competitive athlete. So I was a competitive curler from the time that I was 13. I competed provincially, nationally, internationally during my junior years. And I was a gifted curler, but probably like kind of by accident. I don't particularly remember having to get good or, having to train or having to do exercises to be better at my sport. It just was a thing. I just was a good curler. And when I retired from curling, competitive curling, which was the same year that I opened my naturopathic practice in Burlington, only because I was traveling like 30 weekends a year and my family basically couldn't handle the challenges of me being a competitive athlete in Ontario, I found CrossFit as what I called my competitive athlete recovery program. And since then, I've become way more interested in what it takes for me as an aging adult to incorporate fitness into my life, the impact that it's had on my mental health, my resiliency, my ability to manage stress. And that's just like above and beyond all of the sort of physical strength and benefits that I've gained from being part of the fitness community. I had chronic injuries as a curler. I had chronic knee pain as a curler. And it's funny when people watch a video of me doing a squat, they, will comment, well, I'm so sorry about your knees. And it's interesting, my knees and my body have never been as healthy as they are doing, heavy weightlifting. So I wanted to have this conversation because when I start to talk to women about exercise, the immediate negative thoughts that they have and barriers, and I'm going to actually kind of use the E word and use the excuse word a little bit about why this is not a possibility for them blows my mind. And I think it's because we've generally undervalued the importance of this in society. And I think we also, as women, have a lot of these preconceived ideas of what people are thinking about us when we exercise, what exercise means, what we can get benefit from as far as exercise. And so I wanted Michael to join me on the podcast. One, because I want to be completely vulnerable about how difficult it is for me to stick to an exercise program, even though from the outside I maybe make it look easy. And also he has such wise things to share about the mindset part around exercise specifically. So super long-winded intro. Michael, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Did you say wisdom and wise?
I said twice? Wisdom and wise. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. We'll see what I can do.
I want you to introduce yourself because I think, you've got some background and skills that most, I don't even like calling you a personal trainer. Like I don't even like that title. I don't even want to use that word, there needs to be something that separates you from the average trainer to what you do, because it's just so different and so much, I'm going to use the word better. But I would love for you to walk us through like how you got to this place, like in your career, and what your, mission and passion and all of that is before we dive into the topic.
Absolutely. I think aspiring fitness wizard. I feel like that's the appropriate
just
word.
Aspiring. We're not quite there yet.
Exactly. Yeah. So I definitely wear a number of different hats now. So at the moment, I'm a head coach at CrossFit Connection in Burlington. So I'm in charge of the programming for the group classes on alternating weeks. I run some of the group classes. I also run the Burlington Barbell Club, which is a weightlifting club inside of that gym. I'm in charge of that programming and that coaching. I do some personal training, kind of like as you would envision traditional personal training, and as that goes. And then on top of that, I have kind of my own individualized, semi-remote programming business where I have one-on-one clients that I really take on their individual goals, their individual circumstances, build a fitness program around those goals, and then coach them through that program. And that naturally evolves a lot as that process goes on. And just as a quick background into how I got into all of that, because I kind of fell ass backwards into it, but my whole life growing up was competitive sport, not dissimilar to yours, Jordan. Maybe not on the same level. I feel like you were better. But up until I was about 20, and it was Southwest Ontario hockey, very competitive, extremely political. And it wasn't a physical limitation. It became more of a mental limitation in terms of performance and why I didn't want to take part in the sport anymore. So a few years of finding myself in undergrad was a few minutes away or days away from taking an MCAT for pre-vet, actually. I love animals, side stories. And I was just like, I like sports. so I didn't take it. And I applied to a sport performance psychology program. So that's kind of where the most of my educational background is in sports psych is the easiest way to describe it. That was at U of Ottawa. And then as I was trying to grow that business, I joined the CrossFit gym in Burlington and started coaching on the side after being there for a year. And then that just kind of like organically kept growing. I was able to build relationships. I was able to gain a lot of knowledge and improve what I was doing. And I eventually just kind of transitioned the other way as using all of that kind of like performance and sports psych information to aid and help the people that I was coaching to where I am now. I feel like that's a good enough intro.
Totally good intro.
Cool.
No, it's perfect. And I mean, so the topic I want to get through today, and I was a bit vague at the beginning, and I kind of want to hone in a little bit, because to me, like what I love about podcasting, so let's back up for a sec. What I love about podcasting is that it is a very intimate conversation. People can put in their earbuds and go for a walk and explore a topic or get uncomfortable listening to something and be able to like kind of test the waters on their beliefs around certain ideas. They can learn new information. It's a very like intimate way of connecting with the audience. And so when I think about this topic and I think about some of the mindset challenges that people and women have for pursuing exercise and fitness, I feel like it's such a great space to start to break down some of those barriers and have that conversation. Mm-hmm. I think and I would love to hear your opinion on it. Like, what are the barriers to people doing exercise and accessing exercise as part of their healthcare right now, as you see it?
Yeah, I think, that's a big question.
That's a big one. I know.
A big question. Okay. We'll just kind of go with what comes off the top of my head first. I mean, I think even just kind of looking at immediate circumstance as it relates to, the pandemic, COVID-19 cases, you could even just tie this into people who get sick in general. The vast majority of people who end up in serious conditions are those that don't move well, don't exercise often, and don't eat well. And that ties back into, what does our society value? What do we put value on through our school systems and our children, right? So I don't ever remember really learning about the importance of movement going through school, the importance of nutrition. You would have had to select at a certain point in time, like, hey, I really want to learn about this. And I think that's far too much of an onus on every individual to be like, yeah, I'll just decide that this is important for me. So it's kind of like all the people that don't fall in love with movement, sport, exercise, whatever it might be, they do the thing. They either go through school or get a job and they work. And then they realize when they're like 30 or 40 or 50, like, wow, I'm in pain, or like, I don't look the way I want to look. I don't feel the way I want to feel. And then they have to track backwards. And it's a really, really difficult mindset. I think this is maybe one of the like really nice, almost like I'll call it an anti-light bulb moment, because it's not a positive realization, but I'm sure you felt this or heard this. I felt this for sure. It's like, why does my knee hurt? I'm 45. It's never hurt before. Why does it hurt now? And it's just, I think people take for granted, just the biology of their body and how connective tissue and how nice lubricated joints function as they're younger, and you lose that as you get older, as you do repetitive movements that aren't in the right plane. But just that thinking that like, it's never hurt before, I'll probably never have it. There isn't even that thought. There isn't even that concept of like, do I have this expiry date before? Do I have an expiry date on how good my body feels before I just don't exist anymore? Right. And to me, that's the fundamental barrier, because it's unseen, right? It's not even there. So then you can kind of get into the like the more conscious ones, or the ones that kind of come up, which is like, don't have time, don't have money, don't understand it, don't enjoy it. I've got a couple of those clients. Those are super fun. And I think it just doesn't really matter. Like, if going back to your word of excuse, I think it's a little bit of fear of the unknown, and it doesn't need to be unknown. I guess I'm not biased. It's fine. It's okay.
No, but you bring up a lot of good points there, like just even around the concept or idea of prevention that we don't spend a lot of time on, right? And we don't value it, even in the way our healthcare system is built. I mean, I have to beat people over the head to consider prevention as part of their plan, right? I'm like, can we like do this thing so that you don't die later, right?
Yeah.
And patient's response is like, well, I'm not dead right now. Right. Like I need to worry about like the here and now. And it's hard, especially I think with exercise, because there's discomfort, like there's some inherent discomfort from doing exercise and pursuing new movement, right?
Absolutely.
Like our brain would be totally cool if we just sat on the couch and to put your body through something that is physically difficult, mentally difficult, and all of those things, like it takes quite a resilient person actually to be able to repetitively show up and do that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've got a couple funny examples. This one is from my wife. She actually used to do some training in a CrossFit gym too, but she had a Zoomers program, and they were like 65 to 80. These were some older individuals. A lot of them were broken down in movement, and almost every time, like to the T, someone new would come in, they'd be all excited, they'd do one workout, and then she wouldn't see them for 2 weeks. And she'd have to follow up, and they'd be like, I was in so much pain. I thought I broke my legs and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's literally just muscle soreness, but they don't know what it is. So when they experience it, like the attribution of pain and not recognizing it for what it is, it's like, this is bad. This is not good. Exercise did this to me. Right. And again, it's kind of going back to that, like, it's kind of, well, it's funny from my perspective in terms of like, when you get into sport, athletes almost like seek out pain. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm going after. And then on the other side, it's like, being so averse when you start, because it's kind of scary, right? It's you feel things that you may have never felt before, and it's uncomfortable. And I think it's just having the ability to get uncomfortable, feel that pain. That's a whole other conversation, in a space that's safe enough to come back and to do it again, and to have someone tell you like, no, it's okay. I promise you'll be okay. Like, you won't need to go to the hospital. We know what we're doing. We have to go through this discomfort. Because then what happens from the psychological perspective is that attribution of pain turns into like, oh, this is what I should be feeling, and now this is a positive thing. And then that cycle kind of keeps spinning on itself. And that's where you can kind of get like your positive dopamine release, when it's like, yes, I'm feeling what I want to feel, versus like every time you do like that Bulgarian split squat, you're just like, I don't want to do this. My butt is sore. So
those are supposed to get easier. I'm just kidding. The Bulgarian split squat's supposed to not hurt eventually. No. I remember like when I first joined CrossFit, and this was like, I was seeking something and struggling with like managing that part of my healthcare. And I think that's another kind of interesting part of the conversation. Like I have all the knowledge in the world. I would still like mindlessly wander around a gym, pick up like pretty like relatively light dumbbells and be like, I guess I'll like do something with these for some indeterminate amount of time until I kind of get bored, and then I will put them back down. And that was those were my workouts. And that was deemed as like being great, right? Like just by walking in the door, I'd done something amazing. And I realized I needed to like outsource the decision-making on that part of my health. Like it wasn't actually, I didn't actually know what I needed, because I always would have picked the lighter weight, the less reps, the least amount of time. Like, and I'm a motivated person. And yet that was an area of my own health that I couldn't manage. And when I went to my first CrossFit class, like there was like, we just did like body weight stuff. And I remember the next day, I guess they'd given me like 24 hours to sign up after this like experimental class. Yeah. And I had to yell to my husband downstairs. I was like, Sean, can you bring me my wallet? And then I was like, I literally can't get down the stairs, but I have to sign up for this CrossFit thing. Like, I'm pretty sure I need to do this. And I was so sore from using my body. And it was interesting because I used that as like this sign that there was so much my body was not capable of, because I wasn't focusing on it, rather than being driven away from the sport by being like, this is bad. Instead, I went like, oh my God, this is bad. Like all I did was these couple of like body weight squats and I'm destroyed by it. This is a sign at, I forget how old I was. I was maybe like 32. I'm like, this is not a good thing at 32 for me to be this uncomfortable after moving my body like a kid would have, like so easily.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a great like internalization of that experience. And I think kind of going back to what we've already said, it's really challenging for people to have that, right? To be vulnerable enough to be like, I am not good at this, and that's not good for my health.
And I have to go back and get better.
To go back. That's a really hard thing to do, right? There's a lot of, I'll call it blind trust that kind of has to go into that, in terms of these people know what they're doing, or this person knows what I'm doing, or whatever it is, in order to go back and be like, do that to me again.
I'm here.
It doesn't hurt as bad, but that's it, right? So yeah, there's definitely like a fear barrier. There's that thing where it's like, whatever, Lululemon cliche, like do something that scares you every day, right? Like I think there's that mindset needs to be there, because it's just something that's so foreign for people, right? Like exercising on, I think CrossFit itself offers like a lot of nuanced challenges in terms of the intensity, in terms of some of the higher skilled movements. And it can be super intimidating at first. Definitely requires a lot of high skilled, knowledgeable coaching, good people to make sure that it's being done properly. But doesn't matter what it is, could be anything. Like I would experience that discomfort in a hot yoga class. That's such a scary scenario for me.
Mm.
Don't like the heat.
I did a Pilates class a couple of years ago, and it
Yeah.
was like really, really, really hard for me.
Yeah. You would have left. You would have been like, I'm a French fry. Like I'm not good at this. Um, so I think it's just the mindset just needs to be a little bit more vulnerable in terms of us accepting A, we don't know what we don't know. B, we're not good at what we're not good at. And that's fine, right? Like we're all just doing things to improve ourselves, to get a little bit better, right? Just back into the self-improvement stuff, right? Because we want to be around for a long time, whether it's for kids or grandkids, or just because we like living and life is enjoyable.
The vulnerability piece, that's a good segue because I want to talk a little bit about why, like, I was like, what do people think their trainer's thinking, but they're not? Like,
Mm,
and I like this is something that comes relatively easily to me, the vulnerability piece. There's that meme that's like, I'm a private person. And then also me, I'm going to start with some of my lighter traumas, right? Have you seen that meme? And when I bring
yeah.
someone into my world to support me, I find it quite easy actually to be very vulnerable about
Mhm.
where I'm at, what my needs are, what my mindset barriers are. And probably that's partly because of that's the work that I do. And I want
Sure.
people to be able to show up in my office and say, this was hard for me. This week was not particularly good for me. I need some strategy here for how to manage this. And I know that when patients can show up in that vulnerable space, they benefit so much more. I don't only want to see people if they've like hit it out of the park.
Yep.
And there is that bias that we think that our healthcare team only wants to hear from us when we're doing well, when
Yeah.
our actual skills are for you to come around when you're not, right? Like that's actually like
Totally.
secret sauce. So I find it easy when I'm like, hey, Michael, like come and support me. Okay, let's lay out all of my shit so that you can
Yeah.
get right in on the
Let's get it
inside of
down.
it. However, that I think that is not having that ability or willingness to be that vulnerable is a barrier for people to connect with someone who is going to support them physically. It is really vulnerable to show someone your physical weaknesses.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious what you think. Like I imagine sort of people and women having like these ideas in their head of what your trainer's thinking, but they're actually not thinking.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of that?
Yes. Where do I start with this one? Let's start with our relationship, because I feel like there's going to be some things that I'll say and you're going to be like, "Oh, I didn't even know. Like I didn't even think about it from that perspective." Because in my head, it's like okay, when I start with a new person, I'll always do a movement screen. And I'm a little bit dry and sarcastic in the way that I speak. So I have to be careful whether I know the person or not. Some of that talk needs to stay in my head, or like they could get offended. So the first thing I do, it's a simple movement screen. There's 5 moves. I'll go through it and I'm watching someone. And if I'm looking at them and it's not moving really well, I'm like, wow, this person like really sucks at lifting their arms up over their head. And it's like, I can't really say that out loud unless the person knows me. Because I'm not like, in no way am I internalizing like this person is worth less because they can't get their arms over it. I
It's
don't
just a frank
care.
reality that I can't lift
Yeah,
my arms
like I
over my
don't
head.
care. It's just providing us information into where they're capable of moving right now and where they're not, right? And that in itself, I mean, that kind of gets into the conversation of like individualized versus group approach, but that's not where we're at right now. But if I as I'm looking at that, if I see it and I don't use that information to guide me, that person's going to run into a wall, right? So it's kind of like I have to build the relationship deep enough where there's enough trust where I can say to someone like, "Hey, you need more of these because you suck at them." And that person can internalize and take that as like, right, room for growth, right? The perspective is I have so much to get better here versus, yeah, you're so good at squats. Let's keep squatting. It's like we can, but what's the point? I mean, that kind of goes back to like a conversation about goals, but like what's the point of exercise? Is it just to feed your ego? And if someone came to me and they're like, you know what, I want you to make me feel as good as possible about myself. Okay. Your arms are huge. Let's do bicep curls and tricep extensions. You can tell me how much of a pump you got every day. Like it's irrelevant to me, but I have not had that yet, surprisingly. Most people have goals around performance or weight loss or lifting more weights or whatever it is. And people like challenges, right? There's a lot of reward in working towards something for a bit of a longer period of time, going through struggles and then accomplishing it in some way, right? So that vulnerability aspect, I think, comes down to like, what is the situation that they're in? If it's a one-on-one, it's like, can I trust this person with these things about myself that I don't really like? And maybe I don't even share, maybe I've never shared this information with someone. I don't like my calves. I have really, really skinny calves, right? Like, and I'm shy about that. Do I even say, like, can we do extra calf work, right? I mean, I'm taking a really specific situation, but that might be a soft spot for someone. And then I think when you look at it on the other side, so look at it in a group setting, a CrossFit class, for example, where the relationships are friendly but not super deep. If everyone's vulnerable, it's easier to be vulnerable, right? There's always that camaraderie in a CrossFit class, which I think provides a lot of positive reinforcement that it's okay to not be perfect, right? It's okay to not know the move, to not have the best technique, to be learning. It's okay to be in that phase. And then we look at like just the public scenario, like a Good Life gym, for example, or even I can remember going in, forget thinking about what your coach is thinking. Imagine thinking about what 30 people in the room are thinking about what you're doing, right? And now we're getting into like a psychological framework about, you're not even thinking about the task that you're doing. You're literally just thinking about how you look and how other people are interpreting that. And that in itself is just that's not a good space, right? That's going to negatively impact, unless you get some external validation. If someone comes up to you and they're like, hey, your butt looks great today. Maybe you don't even want that, but like without that external validation, all of that energy is wasted. And it almost has the same effects that like scrolling through Instagram would, in terms of like, oh, these people are perfect. These people are pretty. Why am I not this pretty? Why don't I have this many likes, this many followers? It's the same concept. Why am I not getting attention? Why isn't someone coming up to me? Why this? Instead of just being like, this is what I'm not good at, or this is what I want to work on, and this is the plan to go forward, and that's it. Right. So I think that kind of speaks a lot to, again, that you can see the situations are pretty different. It really depends where the person is exercising, who they have around them, and how comfortable they feel in that situation. And when it comes back to our relationship, when you when I put stuff in the program, right, and you look at it, your interpretation of my expectations may not be my true expectations. And that's tricky, because we can't talk for 30 minutes every day about the intention of the session, because that's not where we are in our lives, right? Like that would be, I would have to live at your house, basically. And I think that's one area that can't exist in a Good Life gym, because you're stuck with your own expectations. Can exist in a directed group class, but is definitely difficult. But in that one-on-one relationship, there's the opportunity for it, but it still doesn't always happen. Because if you don't share what you're feeling, which could be disappointment in yourself for not doing everything because you thought I expected more, you felt like you let me down, and I don't come back or even probe and ask like, hey, how's it going this week? How are you feeling? And you say, oh, I only did 50% of the work because I've been so busy and so stressed. Like, I'm just happy I got down there. And I come back with like, I'm really proud that you did that. Now we're just moving down the path, holding hands, it's sunny, whatever. But actually we can continue to progress from there. Right. It's just like, and now the door really opens, right? And now you have that trust in me that you can say things when it's not perfect. You can say things when it's not good. So kind of coming back to what you said, it's like, I don't coach because I want people to be good at stuff. Like, I'm the car mechanic. I'm the person that you bring your car to when you're like, I don't know, 3 lights are on. I think it's driving fine, but it says no. Just give me a good price. Like that's kind of how I feel. And it's back and forth. Like it's a relationship. So it has to be that way. So it's like, to make that actionable, it's like, no matter what kind of movement or exercise you choose, I think people have to be aware of their own expectations and how that coincides with if other people have expectations on them as well. And just conversations need to be had. It just needs to be really clear about like, what are we trying to get out of this?
Yeah, because it's interesting because even though I feel like I'm like relatively good at that piece, there's been moments where I'm like, oh my God, I can't do 15 of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I even took a minute and hesitated to be like, what do I write down? Like, do I write down that I did 8?
Yeah.
Do I write down that I did none? Like, do I write down that I did 15 and, you know, make a comment that like, so it's even crossed my mind, like, even when I'm, relatively good at saying, this has been a really shitty week. I had a hard time, or this is a PMS week for me. And so my mood has really struggled to make it through these longer sessions or whatnot. Even I have second guessed like the intention. And then for you to like feed back to me, sometimes you're like, Jordan, I didn't think you'd get 15 actually. And
Yeah.
that was so enlightening for me to be like, oh, you didn't? Like you didn't not and I didn't feel it in a way like, oh, you didn't think I was going to be successful. It was actually like, oh, like why was I so
Right.
worried about what I was going to say or write in the little comment box about how I felt about this workout when you were like, just
Yeah.
please try, just please show up. Let's get a really wobbly video of you doing this because you probably
Yep.
can't. And so even like that, like I realized that even though I'm pretty good at it, that I still had things to learn about, how to show up. And I think like circling back to our like person who's afraid to get into an exercise based anything or relationship with someone to help support them in this, they literally just want you to come. Like they just want you to show up
Yeah.
because
That's the start there.
yeah, because like getting anywhere in your exercise is just repetitive attendance.
I think this is my favorite phrase. I think people can say this in a bunch of different ways, but consistency is king. It is the only thing that will determine your success. If it's there, there will be some level of success. You can expedite that success with a bunch of other things, but without consistency, it'll absolutely never happen. I think that's blatantly obvious with nutrition in terms of like, oh, I followed my diet for 3 days and then 2 days wasn't great. And then the weekend was the weekend. And it's like, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. You might have worked backwards, right? Like you can just do some quick math on the numbers of like, well, if you were a butthole and drank like 6 beers on Saturday and 6 on Sunday or a bottle of wine or whatever it was, and you surpassed your calories by like 2,000 on the weekend, there's no way you underate by 2,000 during the week. You lose that week. With exercise, it's so qualitative. Even if the reps are written in, like I think in the world of like strength and conditioning and whatever, there are principles on like how many reps and sets you should do for X amount of exercises. There's no way that principle applies to everyone. There's no way, right? I've experienced things myself doing, a max set of back squats at 40%, and it obliterates me. And I've given it to, I actually find this kind of interesting, but I've given it to females or women at the same percentage, the same prescription. And they're just like, they do like 100 reps and they're like, I didn't feel it. And I'm like, are you serious? Like I almost called myself an ambulance. I almost died. And this person is fine doing the same stimulus. So there's no way that those numbers can be specific to everyone, which means the expectation can't just be like, well, Sally and Bill did this, so why can't you? It doesn't matter. it's irrelevant, right? It was in that instance, it was probably just like here's a range. If you're feeling great, shoot for the top. If you don't get it, you don't get it. We learn, whatever. You're still there. Consistency is king.
Consistency is king, or queen. Queen's fine too.
Or queen. Whatever you think is more powerful. The best. Consistency is the most important.
Consistency is the best. So there's that piece there that like, I think people think the person that they're working with, and that's can be anyone on their healthcare team, has expectations of them that are beyond just trying, when like really what it comes down to is trying and showing up and trying to show up with consistency, regardless of like how good or emotional or whatever you feel. And then I think you kind of, gone into the next piece there where it's like, I think sometimes we imagine our trainer is comparing us against all the other people that they work with. Right. And,
Sure.
and even I'm going to call my husband out because I recently made him start working with you too. And he was like, well, Michael only works with elite athletes, Jordan. And I was like, no, Michael works with people actually. And so we have this mindset that like, we have to be a certain level of fitness before we can X, or we have to be good enough at something before we can try. And I admit, like, I will not join a hip hop class until I feel like I can do like a couple of moves, but it's that same idea, right? I should just go sign up for a freaking class because I'm never going to learn it on my own. One of the things that I learned the most about when I joined CrossFit was how variable everybody in the class actually was and how beautiful that is. So I have like a wacky bicep to weight ratio strength where I could do a legless rope climb like my first 18 months into CrossFit. That's not normal. And there's a lot of other stuff I can't do. And then looking across the gym at someone whose body is different than yours, their levers are different than yours, their experience is different than yours, and they like kill it on some move that I can't even try.
Yeah.
And that was so humbling, but also like very reinforcing that we're all just on our own journey. I think that idea that you have to be good enough to even start is a huge barrier for people. What do you think about that?
Yeah, to me, that comes back to the individualization, right? And I guess there are two like clear approaches to that. One is to just kind of put everyone in the same place and recognize that everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, right? And I mean, I think that's a lesson that like you might get out of a grade 5 class, right? That's like write down your strengths and weaknesses. What are you good at? What are you not good at? And it seems so simple.
And funnily, they're so good at writing down the stuff they're good at, right? If I ask my kids what they're good at, they're like, I'm good at running. I'm good at this.
That's it. I honestly, I feel like some of those activities, there's a period of time in our lives where we just kind of give up on those things. We think they're stupid or we think they're not important. And ultimately they come back to reflection. And when we stop reflecting, we really lose sight of like where we are in perspective to where we want to be or where we could be. It's just kind of like we're standing in this blank room and we're like, am I doing well? Am I successful? Like what even determines that? Right. So, I mean, I think that's a bit more of a philosophical conversation. But I think kind of coming back to the individualization of what does it matter if you're not good at this and you are good at this, right? What does it matter if you're not good at anything? So in that CrossFit class, like I can say firsthand, being part of that community, it's way more enjoyable, and not certainly not pointing this out at you or anyone else, but it's way more enjoyable to coach the person that sucks at everything. They're so bad at moving, but they just want to learn. They just want to get better than the person that thinks they're really good because they compare to other people. I can't help them, right? Because I might say something, I can try, and I might say something and they might be like, yeah, but it feels better this way. Or like, I already squat clean more than that person over there. And it's like, it's irrelevant, right? Like you're built to squat clean better than that person. So like you could be doing even more. You could make it feel even better. And that's almost like a different kind of barrier where kind of like ego gets in the way. But in terms of being insufficient or being not good enough, I've said this to a few people lately where they're not good at something and they're like, that's probably the worst you've ever seen. And I'm like, oh no, there's always worse. I, I don't honestly have a person that, I don't have like this one person where I'm like, oh, you should have met, James, he was the worst. But I do have some recollections where like, I remember I was trying to teach someone how to deadlift, really just how to bend. And I was telling them how to move their hips. I was like, move your hips back. And they did something funny with their head. And I was like, does this person think that their head is their hips? This is the worst. This is the bottom. This is rock bottom. But it didn't matter because that person wanted to
They were
learn.
there. They were
There
trying.
and they wanted to learn and they kept coming. And it was just like, to me, that's just, I think, kind of part of what you were alluding to is like when people are free to express movement how they can and challenge themselves, it's just like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch. It's beautiful to be a part of. It's beautiful to do it with them, because it is just free expression. There's no limitations with the exception of what you're physically capable of doing in that moment, which in itself is just like, it's just a challenge of self-growth. It's just this opportunity to be like, can I get a little bit better? So it's tough in terms of, again, what's actionable on that, because it's like, old school coaches like, just get over yourself, right? It's just like, just do it already. And sometimes you do kind of have to just jump in. Like you look over the edge and you're like, it's really scary down there, but you kind of got to just dive in with a little bit of that blind trust. And other times it's just shutting down the comparisons, right? Just not looking at, why is that person better than me? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? I'm not good enough compared to, I can't go to CrossFit. I look at these CrossFit athletes and they have like 8-packs and whatever. And it's like, if you've never stepped in a CrossFit gym, most people don't look like that, right? They're fit. I think they're very fit in general. But someone walks into like our 5:30 gym and there's, 5 or 6 men with kind of like a little bit of guts and my pregnant wife and, someone who's brand new and can like barely hang from the bar. And it's like, nobody cares.
You know what all those people are though?
Cares.
They're all happy.
They're all happy. They're happy to be
like,
there.
Yeah, they're like happy. And that's, I think, what matters the most to me, or what's made the biggest difference for me in my like pursuit of that community, is that all of those people have this mindset of personal development. And they're all happy, and it doesn't actually matter where they're at, like in their fitness journey, which I think is so amazing. It's funny, you kind of referenced the sort of like that, like bro, like, because one of the things I wanted to ask you, like, but specifically about training women, because one of the things I said to you kind of like early on in our relationship, I was like, I'm not that great with the like, come on, Jordan, just lift it. And it's really, you came into
can I get that audio?
Life,
clip right there. I would like to just like send it to you.
Especially my face. I feel
come on, Jordan.
Yeah, come on, Jordan. But you came into so I want to talk a little bit about the last year of COVID and the impact that that's had, because you came into my life when I was at like the lowest of my low as far as exercise and training. And I've talked about this before, that I was training for a powerlifting competition, and I was like at the peak of my fitness and strength the week before the gyms closed in March 2020. And then literally barely strung it together for multiple days in a row, exercise wise, for the next year, essentially. Barely touched my barbell, cried the majority of the times I tried to exercise in my basement. And I couldn't push through and just have the like, come on, Jordan, like, just do it. Just show up, get her done, do the work. Like that just doesn't work, actually, right? And it was amplified by the fact that so many other things felt wrong in my life. And when I asked for support, or when I reached out to you and asked for support, I was like, specifically, one of the things that you're so great at is that there isn't a lot of like bro kind of encouragement. And instead, Michael, you're like, how did you feel in your soul when you lifted that weight, Jordan? And that like that connected with me so much better, because it made it so easy for me to be like, actually, I'm in tears between sets and I'm scrolling and I'm really not that engaged. And I had a hard day at work and yada, yada, yada. And that has been like one of the reasons I think we've been successful, is because rather than, it feeling like this, just do it kind of coaching, it's been a really different experience. And I've told you, and this is partly why I asked you to have this conversation. I was like, I feel like that's actually what women need, to which your response was, I feel like that's what everyone needs. And you're actually right.
Maybe even men more so, but
maybe, right?
yeah.
Like, can you give us some insight on like just what it's like to coach women? But also, I think you're right that men probably need it more. And then, I mean, you're welcome to talk about the trials and tribulations of coaching me.
Coaching. Okay, so I'm gonna start this one with, to me, this is a coaching question, right? It's like, there is a time and a place to just do it, right? For me to basically push someone who's looking over the edge and just push them right off the cliff. And I think naturally I'm slightly conservative in my mindset around that. But I think I was about to say, I think that only has a place in sport, and it doesn't, because I have very specific examples of clients that I've worked with where I kind of have to just be like, shut up and just move. And it's not, I think where the differentiation needs to be made is, you're lifting heavy weights. It is hard sometimes, heavy enough that sometimes you don't have the energy, the focus, or the capacity to do it well. Like that's kind of part of the game of like lifting heavier weights, right? You don't need to do that, but we enjoy it. And that's part of the challenge. And for me, looking at it from that perspective, it's like, this is what the natural progression tells us we should be able to do if all other things in your life were more or less constant or consistent. And obviously that's not the case, right? So if during that week it was like, if it was the week of your cycle, which your PMS week, whatever it was, and you feel worse during that week, it's not fair to expect the normal progression to occur. And so the things that I say have to be directed at, how are we going to adjust this? So I think, honestly, like, I feel like you think we made so many more adjustments than we actually did, in my eyes, compared to the adjustments that I've had to make for other people. So there was one person that I worked with, loved Olympic lifting, did a little bit of competitions, and just got to the point of being so hard on herself, especially with the snatch, super technical movement, extremely frustrating, that I could just, you can just, if you're in tune with it, you can tell when someone isn't enjoying the session, isn't enjoying what they're doing. And it's like, it happened a couple of times, and then in my head I was like, why are we doing this? Like, this just isn't, this can't be what this person wants. This certainly isn't how I want them to feel. And so we had the conversation, and we just pulled that movement out, just poof, disappeared. And just like that, there was this like bit of a gradual transition from weightlifting only to, I just want to be really strong. And I think it's not fair for the coach to put 100% of the onus on the athlete or client or person, whatever they are, to come up with that idea themselves, because that takes so much courage. Excuse me, can you please tell me to stop doing this thing that I really want to get better at because I'm not good at it? Like, man, that would be a extremely powerful realization, and even deeper ability to just like let go of ego and ask for that to be the case. On the other side of the coin, I genuinely have a client who every time he comes in, he's like, I don't want to be here. He just like, I hate exercising. Everything feels bad. Consistent as anything, maybe missed like 3 sessions out of whatever. He does like basically every other day. So like 160, he's missed like 4 or 5 in a year. Like that's the epitome of consistency, but equally consistent in his ability to complain about what's going on. Doesn't matter what it is. Legs, like bending, squatting, lunge, it doesn't matter. Just lives to complain about the discomfort, to the point where if I'm not there, it's hard for him to do the thing. It's hard for him to sit on the rower and just do a casual row because he anticipates the discomfort. So there will be times where I know I'm going to say something and he's going to send me like a middle finger text coming back. And I'm just like, it's okay. but I'm like, just do it. Just do it. And then there's other times where he's like, I'm so tired. I don't feel well. And it's like, okay, don't do it. It's okay. It's so okay because you've had all of that consistency. So to me, I think coaches in general, from an individualized perspective, should be and naturally attract people with similar mentalities, similar interests, not necessarily as it relates to like sport or performance, but in mindset, right? In like, I like someone to push me, but I also like someone that I can just get some reflection from, some perspective on. Here are my thoughts. And they're like, this is what I see. And I'm like, huh. Because I may not have come to that realization on my own. And so I think I tend to attract people who like those things. So it's a little bit difficult for me as I segue into like just coaching women, because I think I attract people in general who want that kind of thing, which is like, honestly, a lot of the people that I work with are hard on themselves, very hard on themselves. They expect a lot of themselves. And that puts me in the position of literally having to be the nice person. I have to be the like, here's some flowers. It's okay. Like, don't stress. You've done really well lately. Because if I'm harder, what's that person going to do? They're certainly not going to flip around and be nice to themselves. It's just going to get worse. It's going to be like, oh, I'm disappointing my coach. And why am I even doing this? And it's like, no, that's not what that person needs. Sometimes if I get someone who's like on a trajectory, they're doing well, and I can see they can go harder, I'll crack the whip. That's fun. That's fun for me. But finding the opportunity to do that personally, I don't think it's simple. It takes a lot of, a lot of intuition and a lot of trust in the relationship to be able to tell someone like, suck it up and do it. You got to earn that as a coach. And I think far too often coaches are literally just seen as like this motivational factor. And it's like, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But really, really what I'm here for is to help you move through what you're trying to do to achieve your goals, and also understand the process that you're going through. I think that, that trust the process thing gets like, it's so overused, as most cliches in every industry do get overused and put on a t-shirt and put on a bumper sticker. And it's just like, trust the process. And it's just like, what even is the process?
Right. Most people's exercise is not on a process. Let's just be real.
Yeah, for sure. But what they think is the process is just like, that's too much blind trust, right? Mm-hmm. So blind trust to start and jump in. But then it's like, once you start getting those moments of reflection and like, is this the thing that I should be doing? Is this how my coach should be talking to me? Is this how whatever this is happening? It's fairly easy to come to the like intuitive common sense realization of like, yes or no, or just like, wow, I feel so good about myself now that I've been doing exercise. Who would have thought this, right? Having that moment allows it to be, allows that motivation to kind of internalize. So I guess the last point I'll make on that is like, to me, coaching women comes down to understanding the differences in physiology a little bit deeper than just like people are people. Because I think from a mental perspective, on any average day for the same person, yes, people are people. But over the years, I would say in an increasing amount, I've chosen to adjust the training cycles of my female clients around their cycles, because it makes a massive difference in terms of, for most of them, some of them doesn't make any sense in terms of like what should be happening versus what's actually happening. So I'm kind of just like, if it feels good, we're going to go with it. But for some, it's like, if I don't program deload around the time of their cycle where they feel weak and emotional and tired, we're just asking for trouble. We're just asking to dig the hole really deep, and get in a place where like it's going to take a week or two to recover. And then by the time they get back into training, they kind of have to go back into that low level again, right? And I think that, again, there's a lot of attention that kind of has to be paid in terms of like, is it monthly when you check in? Is it weekly? How are the stress levels of other things in their lives contributing to when they're feeling these symptoms? Is it regular? Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's got like 5 days of variance, and like inside of a training cycle, that could be a full week of training, right? So to me, that's the biggest difference in women versus men. I think going back to my point where, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the bias or the stereotype would be, it's so hard to coach women because they're so emotional, and that you have to change things, and guys are just like go go go. And it's like, actually, I feel like for most of the women that I coach, I can just ask the question and get the answer, and that's easy because then we can just move forward. Whereas if I ask the male and they're not able to provide the answer of like, hey, how did you feel in your lift today? And they're like, good. I can't do anything with that information.
No, we're talking about your soul. How did you feel in your soul?
And it's just like, there's a lot of different factors that go into that. Or do they have that athlete mentality, which is like push, push, push? Are they hard on themselves? Are they just not in tune with what they're feeling? Right? I've asked athletes before, like, what do you think when you're doing A, B, C? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, we can't prescribe any protocols to change anything without information. Like, you literally just need to pay attention a little bit, right? And that's hard for some people. And maybe that's harder for guys than girls. I don't know. I honestly don't, just based on my experience, like I couldn't necessarily say that. I think that macho vibe is out there. It's out there in different areas of exercise than others. Like, there's going to be more of a macho vibe in a powerlifting club than there is a yoga class. I would assume most yoga classes don't have like heavy metal going on and like lots of heavy lifting and ego and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, you kind of need that when you're lifting really heavy weights, because it's scary otherwise, right? Like, if you don't have that aggressive mindset. But when it comes to just exercise in general, when it comes to just kind of like, again, learning about what you should be doing, how are we going to improve whatever it is, being in tune with how what you're doing impacts how you feel and how you think is going to lay the foundation for how you go forward with it.
It's so interesting because, like, to just as I'm kind of like imagining us sort of wrapping up, like thinking about all the things that people think are barriers to them getting started and working with someone are actually the things that your coach wants in a client. Yeah. Really, right? Like, so if I imagine, and even yesterday, I had a patient who I was going through. I'm like, well, here's your couple of options as far as like how to access support with exercise. And I was like, what about a trainer? And her immediate, response was, I don't want to be yelled at during my exercise. Oh. And I was like, oh, like, you don't actually know what a trainer does, right? Or your vision of what that is like is so far removed from what that relationship actually can be. That's like saying, like, I don't want to come and see you, Jordan, because I don't want you to yell at me about my nutrition, right? Or whatever it is. But they're like, I think women feel like they don't feel the same every day, and that it is a barrier to exercise and having someone help coach them in that, which that's a conversation we want to be having with them. I think women feel like they have a lot of feels about their body and about their ability to move and their insecurities, and not being able to have that conversation is a barrier for them. And yet that's exactly the conversation we want them to be having with someone so that they can overcome it, right? Just saying in your head, well, I have a bad shoulder and therefore I cannot, that is not actually going to make that shoulder any less bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's only if we are vulnerable enough to say, I have a bad shoulder. My long game goal here is to work on it. So how many of these stupid windmill things are you going to make me do every week, Michael?
A lot of them.
A lot of
them. So many of them.
But that's like, we want that. We want you to lean in with your weakness because
Yeah,
that's where you actually grow. We don't want your movement capabilities, like your box, to get smaller and smaller as you age, which, if we never address those weaknesses and vulnerabilities, then it does just get smaller and smaller. And I think we can look
totally.
up to the generation above us and say, you hear the narrative of like, well, I hurt my knee when I was 19 in a car accident. And so I can't. And the person's like in their 60s.
Yeah.
You let something that happened to you when you were 19 prevent you from moving for the next 40 years?
Yep.
Like, you felt like that was what the option was, is just for your movement box to get smaller and smaller. Because why? Because we were afraid to invite someone into our world and say, I can't do this.
Yeah. Or I don't. Yeah, totally.
And so all the things that are the reason, right, in your mind of why this is not a good thing for you are actually the very things that coaches want to support you with. And all of those ideas of what you think they're thinking is actually not true.
Yeah. And I mean, even I think there is, most of those ideas come from like sensationalized TV or movies, right? Coaches yelling at people, or whatever it is. But it exists. I've seen it in some
Oh, I've
places.
experienced it.
Yeah. I think everyone's experienced it. So I think
Yep.
the takeaway is, not every coach is like that. And most coaches should not be like that. So it's like, instead of not seeking out a coach or a trainer or a solution, it's like, just take your time in seeking out the right one, the one that you want and you need. And then you won't know everything. It's impossible to know exactly what you need. But if you know you don't want someone yelling at you, then like, you better ask that question before you sign up with someone. But signing up with no one just doesn't really solve the problem, right?
Well, do we solve all the world's problems or what?
World hunger next time.
I'm still curious. Like, I want you to comment a little bit about training me, because I feel like partly I'm using this as an opportunity to like hear what you actually think about it.
Yeah, I can do that.
So, because I think it's such a like helpful, and I've always been quite vulnerable on the podcast about various
Sure.
things, because I do think like, it's funny because when people talk to me about my exercise, or when patients talk to me about my exercise, they'll say, well, I exercise, but nothing like what you're doing, Jordan. And I'm like, oh, like I don't want I don't want it to feel that way. And so when someone sees me squat something, I'm like, like I probably was just born that way a little bit. Also, I've worked very, very hard over the last like 8 or 9 years to get to that
Yeah.
space. Um, but I want them to see the other side of it and the hard side of it too, because we post the picture of the, amazing PR or
Yeah.
whatever we do, and people don't see the tears in between, or the text messages about how I feel about my body composition or any of that
Yeah.
shit. And so you just get this highlight version of someone's journey, when the reality is it's actually pretty bumpy.
Yeah.
Especially in the last year, I've had a really hard time connecting to like a higher purpose in my exercise when I'm in my basement by myself,
Yeah.
because I am a team sport person, and that's the way I've always envisioned me working on all of that. So, as our kind of like final parting conversation, I would love to hear what your experience has been like for us working together.
Perfect. Um, yeah, I mean, I think we knew each other a little bit before, not super deeply. I knew what you did, and you knew what I did. I'd coached you a handful of times in various classes. And I think one of the things that I really like to do, even if I think I know the person, is just do like a nice long intake. I've got some pretty insightful questions that, the ones where like you ask the question, you're like, ooh, that's a good question. Like I get like a couple of those every time I ask those questions. And that really gives me insight into not only like actually the words that you're actually saying in terms of, this is what I do from morning to night. Like that's important. But even how you answer the question gives me insight into how you're thinking about what I'm expecting, what you're expecting, what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say, what are you confident about and not confident about, and all that kind of stuff. So I think after that intake, we're still good. We're still good. After that intake, the first realization that I had, which I kind of predicted before, was that you were extremely self-aware to the point at which I probably didn't need to ask you to be self-aware. And a lot of times with people I do, I need to get them to answer questions about like, how did this session go? And when they say like, well, I did this number and not this number, not this number. And I'm like, I don't care what weights you lifted. I want to know how the session went. Were you happy? What was your energy like? What was your mood like? Did you enjoy yourself? Like, those are the things that matter, because that's what's going to make it a sustainable habit and allow you to progress if that's your goal. So right from the start, to me, it was like I was already going to get that feedback. So I was much more interested in just finding consistency in the routine. And so as we started moving, and with some of the bigger lifts, you were sending videos and that kind of stuff, we made a couple of technical adjustments, but you were fairly competent. It wasn't like, sometimes I'll see someone move and I'm like, so that's me being dry, right? Like I don't have that.
Competent.
Fairly
Taking that to
competent.
the bank.
That's it. It's the same as the aspiring fitness wizard. Like, those are on the same level. Some people, when I see them move, I'm like, oh, that needs work. I don't even think we can squat for 8 weeks. And I think we kind of knew that going in. It was like squat, bench, deadlift. Those are a big three. We'll go through that. And at the same time, I find people who, this is just me kind of going through the process of how am I going to help this person. Someone who thinks and is highly self-aware also likes to be challenged. So being challenged in the weights is one thing. That was just a natural progression we built out. But then being challenged with new movement or different movement that was uncomfortable or that you weren't good at in smaller doses was the best way to go about those sessions, right? Let's take our big competency move. We're really good at this. We're going to rebuild this. It's going to rebuild confidence, and you know how to do it. And that's going to be the bulk of the work. And then afterwards, it's kind of like, here's something you're not so good at and is going to complement what we just did. Here we go. And I think in the beginning, there was a little bit of struggle. And I would say it was just struggle with the discomfort of like, I'm not good at this and I don't really like this and I don't really feel it in how I'm supposed to feel it. And so I'm only going to do some of it. And on my end, it was like, well, I shouldn't have expected anything different. And I didn't. Like, that was kind of exactly what I expected based on our first conversation, which is like, I've fallen out of routine. It takes time to get that routine back, right? So whatever, month went by, we chatted again, and it was kind of like, okay, how can we make this more consistent? Then it got more consistent, right? Like, I think it was as simple as that. And not to say that you were like the perfect client on the perfect progression, but it kind of worked how it was supposed to, right? You got stronger, you kept doing more. As you got stronger, you realized you were getting stronger. So you internalized that what you're doing was good, and you kind of went a little bit deeper. We kept, any barriers that came up, like the basement or like, not having a spot for some of those heavy lifts. It was like, okay, here's how we're going to modify. So then, the relationship kind of grew and you felt more comfortable asking questions and even asking questions. This is something I do for all of my clients or athletes. Like, if they need something in the moment, like, they don't have to wait a whole month to be like, so 20 days ago, I had this session and I chose not to do it because I didn't have this set up. It's like, just fire me a message and I'll find a way to adjust it. And it just kind of kept progressing nicely. So from my end, I usually will acknowledge, my goal is to try and acknowledge the things that are going well and figure out why they're going well and reflect that back on you. And then put the big focus on like, how are we going to improve the stuff that isn't going so well, right? So we had a couple conversations about nutrition and how that was or wasn't fitting in terms of what you were capable of focusing on kind of throughout the summer and whatnot. And I think we tried a couple of things, but ultimately we kind of landed in the place that made sense to you, right? There wasn't a lot of conversations around, I feel misaligned, or I feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And so to me, that's a nice indication of like, let's keep going. Let's keep going. So there's no, it wasn't the worst. There's
It
always
wasn't.
someone.
It wasn't the
There's
worst.
always
That's
someone.
perfect. James was
It,
the worst. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know who James is.
yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny, like some of the like solutions that we've come up with along the way too, like have also been like pretty simple / you just calling me out on my shit a little bit.
Yeah.
I think is like there's been well, Jordan, like you're not finishing your workouts. And so don't have expectations of things that you're not doing. And I was like,
Yeah.
fair enough. Okay. There's the like, well, Jordan, when you're alone and you're on Instagram in between your workouts, like, or in between your sets, don't have expectations of making progress when you do that. Okay, Michael. There were like actual, like real life, practical, like small adjustments
Sure.
that we
Yeah.
had to make all along, which I think we forget, like when we're thinking about like, what makes or breaks someone's plan. It actually is those nuanced
Oh, it's the details. It's all
details
details. Yep.
that we rarely have an opportunity to bounce off someone, or for someone to like ask us those nitty gritties. Like, okay,
Yeah.
when you're alone, your brain is not making it very easy for you to make it through these sets. How do we change that?
Yeah.
When you like, and actually troubleshooting all of those pieces, but that's only stuff that can happen if you have a person, right?
Yeah.
And I think
100%.
that's what my like whole take home here is that we value having a relationship for someone to like do our hair and to do all these other things for us in our lives, or these services or whatnot. Like I would never cut my own hair, but for some reason I'm going to drive the bus on like this most important part of my health and wellness on my own, even though I don't know what I'm doing, even though my mindset's getting in the way 90% of the time. Why am I driving?
Yeah.
Right? Why wouldn't I let someone else drive? And I think that's my, my big kind of take home of our conversation today is that like, this is such an important area of people's health. And we are not necessarily like leaning into it with like the level of commitment and depth and emotion and value that I want us to have, so that we can show up stronger tomorrow. Cause that's literally just what I want for people, is to feel strong in their bodies. But it comes from being vulnerable, taking a risk, getting uncomfortable, but mostly like by finding someone to drive the bus. We need someone to help us.
Yeah, it's true. No, I think there's just seeing it as like, to me, it kind of depends on how much time you have. If you want to learn to drive the bus, you can definitely learn to drive the bus, but you won't do it in 30 minutes, and you won't do it in 6 months, and you probably won't do it in 3 to 6 years, right? You look at mastery of anything, right? You take your basic, like whatever, 10,000 hour rule. And that's not just doing exercise for 10,000 hours. That's doing and learning and reflecting, right? So that's in between sets. Maybe you videoed yourself and you're looking at your movement and you're like, what can I improve? So it's just seeing exercise and working out, or whether it's at a Good Life or at a group class gym or with an individual coach and trainer, seeing that as an opportunity to express yourself in a way that's going to make you confident, that's going to make you physically stronger, and then you're just going to feel stronger, and then you're just a badass. It's just like, why wouldn't you want that? Mm-hmm. Why would you be like, I'm okay with just sitting at my desk? It's fine. Right?
Yep.
So anyways.
My last story is I was at the gym on Tuesday of this past week, and I was so tired while I was there. I was like in the depths of like my like last bit of my PMSE week. I had worked all weekend. Oh, because it was on Monday actually. I'd worked all weekend. I felt like garbage, and I must have yawned. I feel like everyone in the class at least once saw me like eating my own face, yawning, kind of yawn. And so many times while I was there, I was like, what are you doing here, Jordan? Like, why are you here when you are, yawning? And by the time the end of the session came, I felt so good. I felt so much better. And it was actually just because I was with all the people. right? Like
Yep.
the work had to get done. In my mind, the work had to get done. I wasn't going to get my goals done for the week unless I went and did it on Monday. And yet I was like so yawny and like not interested in what I was doing. But having the guidance, the support, the community, the space, everyone else who was there was doing their stuff and making fun
Mhm.
of my yawns.
Yep.
That actually helped me get through that. And I was thinking about it, knowing that we were going to have this conversation a couple of days later. I was like, if any of those pieces of that puzzle weren't there, that work would not have happened, right? If I wasn't accountable to
Sure.
you or the coach on that day or the other people in the room or my membership to that community or all of the things, if one of those pieces was missing, I probably wouldn't have pulled through and done it.
Yep.
And then we beat ourselves up for being alone in our basement with, a YouTube video trying to like pursue this on our own. I think like there's absolutely like cure in the community and having those relationships for someone to support you through your exercise journey, whatever you want that to look like. Um,
Absolutely.
I would love for you to share kind of like your like final parting words, like your kind of your soapbox speech around what you want for our listeners, but also how they can find you.
Sure. So I'm a little under the radar. I mean, I work with a lot of people. I think the best way to get a hold of me is probably just through Instagram. My handle is Coach Michael 91. Um, I'm I'm super responsive with direct messaging and that kind of stuff, and I'm totally happy to answer people's questions or have conversations around anything we talked about or anything related to um, exercise, fitness, nutrition, whatever, all that kind of stuff, mindset, even. Final parting words. I think it's it's difficult for people who did not inherently grow up with exercise as part of their life for it to hold an important place in their mind. And I think it's one of those things that you really don't know until you try it. And it's not like a new food where like you're going to know right away whether you like it or you don't. You're going to have to try it a few times. So that's where that trust the process bumper sticker can kind of go in, right? I think all of the things we're saying is like be vulnerable, be willing to suck, be willing to be the worst person to start, and know that if you keep going, you're going to be one of the best stories of look what I can do now. Look how much stronger I got. Look how much more confidence I got. The external validation will be unbelievable. There's no, there's no sorry, I laugh because I just like you don't hear this, but like there's no one who takes on exercise in some way, gets stronger, fitter, looks better, feels healthier, everything in their life is better, and they're like, I wish I didn't do that. I wasted so much time exercising. Nobody says that, right? Like you never hear those stories. The only things you'll hear are people who basically like you said got hurt at 19 or like got a little bit afraid because they had one bad experience, never went back, and now they're stuck with forced to be happy with, well, I can only walk now and I kind of walk with a limp. And it's like, don't feel boxed in. Like if you're boxed in, that's the story you've told yourself. And the best part about that is you write that story so you can change it. Right. So yeah, I mean, whether it's reaching out to me and asking how you can do that or whatever it is, like just take one step. Just take one step in that direction and then take another one and then take another one and then take another one. And eventually it won't feel like you have to tell yourself to take a step. You'll just kind of be walking. And now you're on this wonderful fitness journey and you can do things you couldn't do before. And that's just cool.
It's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so cool. And really, like, I think, what I've learned the most, I would say, through my own journey with getting stronger is just having to show up. That it's like
Yep.
when I was a youth athlete, it didn't matter. I could eat whatever, not sleep,
Yep.
binge drink, get on the ice, win the game, totally fine. Like that all happened. This has been a different experience and um, such a great life lesson, really, of just like showing up, and it's going to be hard and uncomfortable, but the discomfort of not doing it now is greater than the
Oh, yeah.
discomfort from doing it. And that's, I think, what I want people to know. I want them to have the inside look at, how much we need to embrace that discomfort and that vulnerability and that learning mentality, that this is not something we're inherently good at, but yet we can be so much better if we
Yep.
are willing to put some time and energy and emotion towards it. Thank you so much for spending time with me. You spend a lot of
Thank
time
you.
with me.
That's okay. That was super fun.
Thank you so much, Michael. We will put all the links for your Instagram and everything in the show notes so people can reach out.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.